Have you ever wondered if skinwalkers are real or not? I was also curious and went online to search and found stories about skinwalkers, and I believe they are real. First, let's start with the origin of the skinwalker. On October 15, 1752, Canyon de Chelly, Navajo territory, now Arizona. On the darkest waning moon night of that autumn, the usually peaceful land of the Navajo in Canyon de Chelly was suddenly engulfed in ghostly howling winds. In the small village at the foot of the mountain, a man named Hastani, once a renowned medicine man in the tribe, had fallen into the abyss of darkness. Hastani's wife and daughter had died mysteriously just days before. Their strange deaths were unexplained, and Hastani believed the spirits had abandoned him. Angry and desperate, he decided to perform a forbidden ritual to take revenge on those who had taken his dearest loved ones. Under the flickering candlelight in a dark cave, Hastani donned the skin of a black wolf, an absolute taboo in Navajo culture. His hand trembled as he drew horrifying images on the ground with human blood, mixed with bone ash from a recently robbed grave. As the ritual reached its climax, Hastani felt his body tremble violently, his flesh feeling like it was melting. A hoarse voice echoed in his mind. "From now on, you are no longer human. You will hunt the living, walk on the four legs of beasts." Immediately, his body deformed painfully. His flesh turned into a coat of jet-black fur. Long, sharp fangs grew from his blood-soaked teeth. His eyes glowed an eerie red. The first skinwalker in Navajo history was born. From that night on, the villagers began to witness horrifying events. Livestock brutally torn apart, a dark figure with human-like laughter echoing in the dead of night, and especially a series of unexplained deaths. The Navajo panicked. No one dared to step outside after sunset. The peak of terror occurred on the night of October 22, 1752. A group of hunters decided to track the mysterious creature. They followed strange, giant footprints to the edge of a deep chasm. Suddenly, from the darkness, a giant wolf standing upright on two legs appeared, with glowing red eyes, emitting a chilling sound. "You wanted to see me?" Before they could react, they all found themselves paralyzed, as if trapped in their deepest nightmare. The monster took slow steps towards them, each claw dragging across the cold stone ground. It leaned close to the lead hunter's face, its piercing red eyes staring straight into his soul. A familiar voice spoke mockingly. "I was once Hastani. Now I am your eternal nightmare." After that night, no one ever saw those hunters again. The Navajo passed down stories of the monster who had lost its humanity, forced to hunt humans to sustain its existence. Hastani became a haunting legend in the land of Canyon de Chelly for centuries thereafter. Today, when night falls on Navajo land, people still say that if you happen to catch sight of glowing red eyes in the mountains, absolutely never look directly at them. Because that is the first skinwalker, still wandering, searching for unfortunate souls for its next ritual. November 15, 1985, the western training forest area of the Quantico Military Base, Virginia. Jason Miller, a 28-year-old military policeman, was conducting a night patrol in the base's isolated forest area. He was of Navajo descent and had heard many mysterious legends from his grandfather since childhood, especially about skinwalkers, creatures capable of shape-shifting, spreading terror in the darkness. Around 11 p.m., Jason stopped his patrol vehicle on a dirt road near the edge of the forest to check wildlife surveillance cameras he had set up the previous week. He walked about 1 mile deep into the forest, the thick darkness surrounding him, only the sound of his footsteps on dry leaves echoing steadily. Jason quickly climbed up to where the camera was placed on the large oak tree. While checking the images from the camera, he suddenly heard a strange noise, footsteps approaching from a distance. Jason quickly turned off his flashlight, his heart pounding as he saw a dim black figure in the faint moonlight. "Anyone there?" Jason called out loudly, hoping it was a lost officer. The black figure stopped, then suddenly stood upright on two legs, clearly revealing the form of a tall deer, but its stance was bizarre, its head tilted slightly as if looking directly at Jason. In the deadly silence, the creature suddenly slammed its head hard against the tree trunk, repeatedly, until its head shattered, blood splattering on the wood. Jason trembled. Before he could recover, the strange creature suddenly lifted its head, directing its empty eyes towards him. From its mouth, a clear voice rang out, cold and threatening.
"I know you're there."
Jason panicked, fell from his spot, hastily abandoned all his equipment, and rushed towards his patrol vehicle. He sped back to the base, his hands and feet trembling violently, his pale face unable to hide his terror. A month later, Jason finally gathered enough courage to return with colleagues to retrieve the abandoned gear. The large oak tree still bore dried bloodstains, bone fragments scattered at its base, clear evidence of the horrifying experience Jason had endured. Since then, Jason always hears whispers in the dark night, as if the creature had followed him home. And every time he hears it, Jason recognizes the terrifying voice that still haunts his mind. "I know you're there." August 10th, 2021. The forested mountain area near Greenville, California. The Dixie Fire was raging fiercely, becoming one of the largest disasters in California state history. The National Guard was mobilized to assist with rescue, civilian evacuation, and security around the fire zone. That night, a patrol team of 6 guardsmen was assigned to control a secondary road near the forest edge to prevent civilians from entering the dangerous area. Around 10:30 p.m., while the team was taking a short break, suddenly a painful scream, clearly a woman's, echoed from deep within the forest, shattering the silence. The entire team immediately went on high alert. Sergeant Brian Johnson moved forward, firmly gripping his rifle, shouting towards the forest, "Is anyone there? Need help?" A deadly silence fell, before Brian's own voice echoed back from the woods, clear and exact, word for word. "Is anyone there? Need help?" A chill ran down the spines of the entire team. Before anyone could comprehend what was happening, a tall, dark figure emerged from the bushes, standing upright on 2 legs. Under the dim moonlight, the soldiers froze, recognizing the figure as resembling both a human and a deer, its eyes glowing red like 2 embers. The strange creature turned its head to look directly at the soldiers, slowly breaking into a twisted, evil grin. No one dared to move, fear seemingly suffocating each person's breath. Suddenly, the creature let out a piercing shriek, full of fury, then vanished into the dark forest as quick as lightning. Terrified, the team retreated to the main rendezvous point, reporting the incident to their superiors. Although reassured that it might have just been wildlife, they all knew they had encountered something not of this world. 3 months later, the wildfire was fully contained. However, every night, Brian had nightmares, always featuring the glowing red eyes and the twisted, malicious grin. He knew well that creature had not left him. It was still hiding somewhere in the darkness, always watching Brian's every step, waiting for a chance to return. And in every dream, Brian's own voice always echoed clearly from the darkness. "Is anyone there? Need help?" November 12th, 1985, Arizona Camp Navajo Military Base. This place lies amidst the desolate Arizona desert, remote, quiet, and full of mystery. Camp Navajo Military Base is famous for strange stories that no one dares to speak of, except those who have witnessed them firsthand. And that day, a story unfolded that soldiers who were once here can never forget. Bob, a young soldier newly enlisted in the army, was assigned patrol duty around the base's border on a cold night. He only had a few months of experience in the military, but his courage and determination had helped him overcome initial challenges. However, that night, he didn't expect to face a horror more terrifying than any battle. Darkness fell quickly, leaving only the faint, flickering silhouettes of light poles against the desert sand. Bob and his teammate were tasked with patrolling along the base fence. Everything was peaceful until an unusual figure appeared in the dim light. A man wearing deerskin with long white hair stood there as if waiting for someone. It was a strange and frightening sight, as the soldiers had never seen anyone outside the military present in this area late at night. He and his teammate approached, ordering the man to move away from the restricted zone. However, there was no response. Bob felt a chill run down his spine as he realized this man was not ordinary. He quickly drew his gun, and just as he turned back to look at his teammate, the man vanished. Before he could understand what happened, a large, strange rabbit appeared right where the man had been. The rabbit stared directly at Bob, then ran off, disappearing into the darkness. More horrifyingly, when Bob looked back, the man had reappeared, but this time outside the base fence, an area impossible to cross. Unable to explain what had happened, Bob and his teammate immediately left the area and dared not report it. However, that wasn't the end. The next day, as the base was shrouded in fog, strange events became increasingly frequent. Another soldier named Tom reported hearing a strange call from the border area, the voice sounding exactly like their commander's. However, when he responded, he only received silence. Approaching the fence, Tom couldn't believe his eyes. The large rabbit appeared again, this time with glowing yellow eyes, exactly like the man's eyes from the previous day. Suddenly, the rabbit lifted its head, stood upright like a person, and stared at them with eyes holding something mysterious. Before they could understand, the rabbit abruptly vanished into the darkness. Strangely, right after that, in the darkness, the whisper of a human voice echoed, as if manipulating their minds. "I know you're there." Bob and Tom fled in panic, but couldn't escape the feeling they were being watched. Strange sounds echoed in their minds throughout that night, and every time they looked back, they saw a dim figure waiting for them from afar. From that day on, Bob never returned to Camp Navajo. He couldn't face what he had witnessed. Every night, he woke up haunted, hearing the whispers, the cold laughter echoing as if the Skinwalker was still watching him from the darkness. December 15th, 1985, 1 month after the strange event, a military search party discovered Tom's corpse in the base's border area. His body was savagely torn and clawed, as if some creature had dragged him into the darkness. Notably, there was a large bite mark on Tom's neck, like that of a beast, and his eyes had turned yellow. On July 12, 1998, in a remote forest in the western United States, a grandfather and grandson, John and Billy, were hunting together. This forest was rarely visited, a wild place isolated from the outside world. Both grandfather and grandson were accustomed to nature and often went hunting, but today they would face an inexplicable, strange event, one that would later cause them to live in fear forever. While moving through a sparse forest area, they suddenly saw a deer moving ahead. However, the strange thing was that this deer did not act like the normal deer they had seen before. Instead of running away, the deer began bashing its head violently against a rock, each blow fracturing its skull, blood and brain matter starting to ooze from its head. But strangely, instead of stopping or moving away, the The deer continued to lick its own blood and brain matter off the rock, as if there was no life left in its body. This sight horrified the grandfather and grandson. They couldn't comprehend why the deer was acting this way. But what was even stranger and more terrifying was when the deer had bashed its head until it was nearly unrecognizable, it suddenly stood upright like a human, its soulless eyes staring intently at the two of them. It felt like they were facing an unnatural entity, not a normal deer. The deer stood straight like a human, looking at the grandfather and grandson for a few seconds, then turned and walked into a nearby stream. Strangely, it didn't react like a deer, no struggling or panic. The deer simply drowned in the stream, like a creature that had completely lost its survival instinct. This scene caused extreme panic in both the grandfather and grandson. They didn't think, just hastily left the area immediately. They ran straight home, but even upon arrival, they couldn't shake the creepy feeling, secreto. They dared not tell anyone, fearing people would think they made up the story. However, the haunting memory couldn't fade, and this story was widely shared on Reddit, where members began linking this bizarre event to the Skinwalker, a creature capable of transforming into animals. After the story spread, a warning was issued. Skinwalkers are not just legends, but phenomena that can appear any time, especially in desolate places where humans least expect them. These creatures might not only hide in the dark, but also possess the ability to manipulate and control animal behavior to carry out their dark plans. This story made everyone ponder whether Skinwalkers truly exist, and if they could be watching us even when we don't realize it. On a night in November 1994, at a remote military base in Utah, a group of soldiers, David, John, and Mark, were assigned patrol duty near the Skinwalker Ranch. This was an isolated area, surrounded by sparse forests, hills, mountains, and desolate regions. Everyone knew this place was famous for supernatural phenomena, but no one truly believed the folklore. Until one dark night changed everything. Throughout the patrol, everything was normal, until they neared the ranch area where the local residents' livestock grazed. The cows, sheep, and horses were the main livelihood of the Sherman family, the owners of this ranch. One strange thing was, while patrolling across the open field, David suddenly felt something was wrong. The animals here seemed scared. They wouldn't leave their pens. Their eyes were fixed in one direction, but they didn't move at all. As the soldiers approached the livestock pens, they noticed a cow lying motionless, its body bearing strange cuts. There was no blood around, but body parts had vanished grotesquely. David, though bewildered, continued to investigate. A sudden gust of wind whistled past, startling the whole group. They heard rustling in the nearby bushes. The group halted, readying their weapons. Just then, from the darkness, a giant black figure emerged. It was a wolf. But it wasn't like ordinary wolves. This wolf stood upright on its hind legs, more than twice the height of a normal wolf, and its eyes glowed brightly like two embers. It suddenly lunged towards the soldiers. David quickly shouted and started firing his weapon. He fired 3 shots consecutively, but the wolf didn't fall. Blood splattered, but the creature only retreated slightly, then continued advancing towards them at terrifying speed. The shots couldn't take it down, but made it retreat straight into the darkness. When the soldiers pursued, they found absolutely no trace of the wolf. No footprints left on the ground, no smell of blood, just a silent and cold space. Raim. The next morning, when they returned to search the area where the wolf disappeared, they discovered a strange circle on the ground, as if some object had landed and left marks. In the center of the circle were sticky pieces of flesh from the killed livestock. This wasn't the first time the Sherman family had encountered such strange phenomena. Previously, their livestock had also disappeared suddenly, or were killed bizarrely, their body parts precisely removed. These traces couldn't be explained by natural phenomena or wild animals. And now, the soldiers were also facing something strange and inexplicable. Returning to the base, David couldn't sleep. The wolf's glowing eyes still haunted him. Perhaps not only skinwalkers, but other supernatural entities were hiding in this area, waiting to intrude and wreak havoc. Everything seemed far from over. On June 13th, 1987, James's family drove from Salt Lake City, Utah, to a small remote house in the outskirts of Nevada, about 50 miles east of Reno. The surrounding landscape was desolate, only arid desert and distant mountains. The late afternoon light cast a reddish-purple hue, creating an atmosphere both beautiful and menacing. This was a visit to James's grandmother that he would never forget. James' grandmother, Nala, was a Navajo woman living alone in that simple house. Although she wasn't religious, she had a strong belief in supernatural phenomena. One strange thing James remembered about her was that she always kept the curtains closed at night and would only quietly peer outside, her eyes clouded, as if waiting for something. Every time James asked her about this, she would only reply with a sentence he couldn't understand. "The Yenaldlushi is watching me." One afternoon that day, James and his younger brother, Charlie, then only 6 years old, were playing in the yard in front of their grandmother's house when she suddenly rushed out from inside. Her face was deathly pale, as if she had just seen a monster. "Get back! Get back now!" she screamed, grabbing Charlie tightly and pulling them inside the house. And in that instant, they saw a large black shadow blocking the yard gate. That dog, as large as a Great Dane but jet black like the night, stood there, its bright yellow eyes staring intently at them, making it impossible to look away. Those eyes were not those of a normal animal. It looked at their grandmother as if it already knew she would be its prey. Though the sun had long set, the dog's eyes still shone brightly, casting a strange light that seemed to envelop their surroundings in gloom, as if darkness was lurking. A heavy breath emanated from the dog. Then suddenly it turned and ran into the darkness. But the strange thing was, it didn't run like a normal animal. It moved so fast they only saw a shadow flash by, unable to recognize it. When the dog disappeared into the night, the air felt compressed, and a chilling sensation enveloped them. James' grandmother stood still, her eyes wide open, muttering words they couldn't understand. "The Yenaldlushi has found me," she said, her voice full of despair and fear. At that moment, James didn't understand why she was so terrified, but he clearly felt the danger emanating from that black shadow. A few days later, James's family received news that his grandmother had decided to move. There was no clear explanation, just a strange silence. Everyone in James's family was confused, and James couldn't forget the eyes of that black dog. Though they didn't say it, James knew that the thing his grandmother called Yenaldlushi was not a normal creature. It was a dark spirit, a supernatural being she had lived with for many years. A few weeks later, when James' family visited her at her new home in another area, she no longer spoke of the Yenaldlushi. But James knew well, something had followed her for all those years, and perhaps it was still lurking somewhere in the darkness, waiting for a chance to return. The night of August 21st, 1910, in the Michigan woods. This is what Alex recounted. "I still remember that night vividly. The night fear would haunt me for the rest of my life. It was the night of August 21st, 1910, when my cousins and I were staying at my grandmother's old house in the middle of rural Michigan. The house was deep in the woods, where no artificial light could penetrate the dense canopy, and the cold evening winds only made the atmosphere gloomier. Grandmother was the only one living in that house where everything was old and silent. That desolate space always filled me with an inexplicable anxiety. That night, we gathered around the campfire, telling ghost stories and playing Truth or Dare. The four of us, including me, Alex, 15, Daniel, 14, Ben, 13, and the youngest cousin, Charlie, 10, dared each other to do all sorts of things, until Daniel suddenly dared me and Ben to walk through the dark woods. At that time, I didn't think much of it. Being the oldest, I always thought I was strong, not easily scared. But then, I realized the chill of the forest had enveloped everything. We didn't bring a lantern, as it wasn't completely dark yet, but the night air seeped into our skin, and gloom began to cover everywhere. We walked along narrow paths, branches reaching out as if wanting to grab us. Each step seemed heavier, and that quiet space didn't feel peaceful, but like the silence of something waiting. After about 5 minutes, we could no longer see the fire behind us. Everything around was dark and frighteningly silent. And then, like a shock, we saw a giant figure right in the middle of the path. A creature, not human nor beast. It had the body of a dog, but the head of a human. Its eyes glowed like headlights, staring intently at us. Everything seemed to stop. I couldn't move. Both Ben and I stood frozen, our legs stiff as if devoid of strength. It crouched, its long arms hanging down, just a few inches from the ground. Each step it took was heavy, the sound echoing as if from within the earth, the air feeling suffocating. Both Ben and I were paralyzed by fear. The creature looked straight at us, its eyes full of hostility, as if seeking to kill us. And then it darted away with unimaginable speed, swift as the wind. We only managed to scream desperately before turning and running hastily back towards the fire, not daring to look back. When we returned, the horrific scene hadn't left us. We saw the corpses of grandmother's 2 dogs, Jax and Daisy, scattered in the yard, brutally torn apart. I can't describe the feeling of seeing their bodies. The claw marks on their bodies were horrifying, as if they were ripped apart by something incredibly powerful. I felt a chill from the depths of my soul. Not a word was spoken. Only heavy breathing and hurried footsteps running into the house. We couldn't sleep, but everything remained silent. I tried to ignore the fear, but couldn't. A while later, I woke up, and when I opened my eyes, I saw all my cousins sitting silently, wordless, motionless. I looked into their eyes, and I saw extreme fear in their gazes. All 4 said nothing, but all were looking towards the window. Then one of them, Charlie, the youngest cousin, gently nodded towards the window. I turned to look, and then I saw a face pressed against the glass pane. That face was not human, but something chaotic. Its eyes were empty, wide open, looking down at me with eyes full of hostility and disgust. I let out a scream. But as soon as my scream rang out, the face vanished, as if it had never existed. Grandmother immediately called the police after I recounted everything, but they found nothing. The police searched the forest, but everything was the same. No tracks, no evidence. We never went back there at night again. A few months later, our family moved away, leaving behind the old house and the mysterious forest. But to this day, I still can't forget that face, those eyes glowing like headlights, and the strange creature in the woods. Surely something terrible is hiding in the darkness, a creature we cannot explain, cannot comprehend. And I know that if I went back there, I would find something waiting for us. Something not human nor animal, but it's still there, lurking in the darkness, and I will never forget what I saw. All the stories above were collected and searched for by me on the internet. I don't know if they are true or not, and if skinwalkers really exist. If you liked these stories, please comment the number 9 to let me know, and subscribe to my channel Apex Fears. Have a good day.